My name is Rita Haddow. As I grew up, my brother and I learned how important it was to give back. I was immersed in Judaism and giving. It was always a very important part of our life. I can even remember my grandmother having a little blue box in the dining room, and we always put some money in the blue box. They used to say about my father, he would rather give his money away than do anything else with it. I'm married, and I have 4 children. After I was married, I became involved with Hadassah, National Council. I was on the board of the Jewish Center. Then I became involved with the Detroit Zoological Society. I became a docent. I also became very involved with JARC. I was on the board of JARC. As the years went on, JARC, the Zoo, and Federation became my major gift-giving organization. To give to my community that has given me the opportunity to do so many things is important. I want Judaism to last and be successful. I want my grandchildren, and now I have 2 great-grandchildren. They are being raised to know what Judaism is. I've been very lucky in my life. I've never been in a situation where I didn't have the means to do things. I want my community, my Jewish community, and my civil community to be successful. And if I can help in any way, I'm here.
My name is Guy Stern. My name was not always Guy Stern. I was born Günther Stern, a German name. But when I came to the United States in 1937, 5 days later I was in high school, and half a year later I had a girlfriend. She said my name, pronounced in English Gunther Stern, was a tongue twister, and she liked me, she said, but she would leave me my first 2 letters, G-U, and add a Y, and I liked that so well, I kept it when I became a citizen at Camp Berkeley, Texas. My family, despite an almost successful rescue mission on my own part, did not get out of Germany, and the last trace is the Warsaw Ghetto. I was in the army from 1943 to 1945. It had a vital part on my life. I was decorated for my army service. General Hodges awarded me the Bronze Star, and the French gave me the Legion of Honor because I had a few successes as an interrogator or interpreting German documents. I went to Detroit, Wayne State University, was an administrator for a while, and then returned to my discipline, which is German language, literature, and history, and spent more than 20 years, 25 years in Detroit. It's a wonderful world to open eyes to young people, to make them become excited about what you're teaching. Today I still get letters from some of my former students. They say that I had significant influence. I also thoroughly enjoyed the research that a professor is supposed to do. I am now the director of the Institute of the Righteous of the Zeckelman campus of our Holocaust Museum here in Greater Detroit, located in Farmington Hills. I'm a member of our synagogue, Shir Shalom, and I've given some guest lectures to youth groups at invitation of the rabbis. I take part in discussion groups. I think that I opened the students' eyes to a world with which they were not acquainted. Whenever I did my job well, it stayed with them.
My name is Sima Karn, born and raised, lifelong Detroiter. Got married in 1953 to the love of my life. Married for 55 good years. Had 4 fabulous children who give a lot to society. And then the prize of having 4 children is I have 7 amazing grandchildren. After I raised my children, my husband and I opened Charles Furniture Warehouse. And I was very involved with that until we retired in 2000. After I retired, I had to reinvent myself and get back into things that I enjoy doing and recreated a whole new life. There was a big void after my husband of 55 years died, who was the love of my life. 4 years ago, a lovely man came into my life, Larry Traeger. We enjoy a great relationship, which is nice to know you can have in your 80s. I did a lot of volunteer work, but nothing impacted me as much as getting involved in 2 things. One was joining Technion and being on the board, and the other was going to Mir every Monday and reporting what was happening in the world that week. And I find the people there so inspiring. And their caregivers come who are wonderful. They participate, they're informed, and once a year I give a luncheon for them because they are angels. It starts my week off right. I get to do what I love to do, and obviously people love to hear it. I think you learn from everything you experience. I learned so much when I was in business. I learned so much with all the volunteering I've done. In the early 60s, Gloria Steinem came into my life, and I was very influenced by her and had the pleasure of meeting her in person and being with her 3 different times. She kind of made me realize that women really don't know their value. I hear Mika Brzezinski talking about that now. She was a big influence in my life. I've had the pleasure of meeting wonderful people that I continue to meet, even with this 8 over 80. I was always lucky to have people around that I could look up to and emulate. I love our community. I think we have the best Jewish community of any city. I'm very proud of us.
My name is Arthur Weinfeld. I grew up in Detroit, which is now near Rosa Parks Boulevard. My mother came from Transylvania, which was part of Romania, and my father came from Yugoslavia. They were caught in the Depression, and that, was hard on all of the people that lived through it. They had a very tough time for a long time, but they managed. They both spoke Hungarian. Eventually, I learned Hungarian. I was going into the service in 1952. They were looking for a translator that could speak Hungarian, and I was chosen to be the 1 millionth draftee from the inception of the Korean War. When I got into the service and went to basic training, the sergeant in charge reminded me every day that I was the 1 millionth and it wasn't going to do me any good. I marched at the end of the line every day, but I was fortunate because of the language. I was in the CIC, which is the Counterintelligence Corps, and it was certainly a much, much better life than if I had been fighting with a gun. I had a small furniture store in Utica. I had it for 45 years until 2001 when I retired. When I was in business, I was very legitimate, and I prided myself on that. My assumption was that everybody that came into my store was honest and trustworthy. Now I'm fortunate. I have 4 children, 6 grandchildren. Rita and I have been married 65 years in August. I had a good friend, Bert Stein, that recommended that I do something worthwhile, and so we started at Yad Ezra, and from there we did Meals on Wheels, and then I added the zoo and Friendship Circle, and now I go to Forgotten Harvest in the afternoon after I've been at Yad Ezra. I think we've been to Israel 4 times. Every one of our children and grandchildren have been there. We have a very, very strong feeling for Israel. And one thing that bothers me most, how many of us as Jewish people have no feeling towards Israel. I think the Jews have to be aware of the fact that there is an Israel, support it in every way we can. I think I owe it to the community. I've been lucky, and I'm grateful.
My name is Harriet Brown Saperstein. I grew up in a 2-family home about 10 blocks away in Brooklyn, New York. My mother worked full-time but also was very much involved in charities. She was involved primarily in Jewish charities, Hadassah, Ort, for example. I've broadened that definition because I see my world as much broader and much wider. And so I had a really good base upon which to start. Probably one of the most important things in my education was the High School of Music and Art. And that's because it took me out of my immediate environment. I grew up in what we called an integrated neighborhood, meaning it was Jewish, Greek, and Italian. And then in graduate school at Brown University, I had to do a research paper on my family's position in Brooklyn and in Montreal. And I realized now, in graduate school, not at the time, that it was because the Jewish kids in New York had access to music school and music lessons, and the test built on that. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but that led me to think about inequality in a different way and to recognize the hidden inequalities in our world. And again, try to take a stand to see what could we do, either in the long run or in the short run, to try to reduce those inequalities. If I talk about social justice, that's the issue that I try to deal with. But I'm lucky in the life I've led in Detroit. It has been very good to me professionally. I've worked hard, and I can touch and feel the changes I've made with the help of a lot of people. There's nothing I did by myself. There's nothing I did without the help of other people. And I can look and touch things, whether it's the riverfront or in Highland Park particularly, which other people can see as well. I don't have my name on anything. I don't need to. But I'm lucky to be able to do that. I had met Al. I knew him since I was a child. And basically, I fell in love with his lifestyle as well as with him, meaning the graduate student, the academic life, and that was really important. And we have had almost 63 years of a good life together, strengthening each other. I would not be the person I am or the success that I am without Al. He would not be the success or the person he is without me. And I have 2 beautiful daughters, Shira and Rena, both in nonprofit work. Both of their husbands are good people. I have 2 grandchildren that are finding their way. In fact, my granddaughter Maya works in gerontology in Manhattan. So I hope to continue the role of my mother into my children and into the grandchildren and to other people I don't know. That's was, I guess, always my goal in life. What can I do to help other people move on What could I do to make my community better in real terms?
I'm Douglas Blum, and I'm 80 years old. I worked at Emmerman Industries, and then I started bar processing.
Who needed those parts that you were talking about?
Ford, Chrysler, General Motors.
So they were separate companies and needed different processing, and your company did that.
Correct.
We went to high school together but didn't know one another. We met years later and we were both 38, and Douglas had his son and I had my 2 boys.
When Barb and I were dating, I said to her that being Jewish is very important to me. And did she mind? And she said, no, of course not. I don't mind at all. That was the reason why I got involved.
We had an opportunity to choose how we would help with our money. And we chose
the Matzah Factory. I really like the Matzah Factory. To open up people's minds. We started that to share memories. It was the most visible entity at the center.
And do you remember what they said about you as far as your leadership?
Yes, I listen a lot and talk after I listened. Between the 2 of us, we have 3 sons. We got married in 1977.
How did you start with the trains? What did you do in the beginning when you were a boy?
I worked for a hardware store, setting up trains, and I would get a commission on anything I sold the family. And so I made a lot of money as a young person, 12, 13, 14.
And you had kept your trains and not done anything with them for a while? And you began again when we married?
I built a wonderful layout downstairs.
How many feet of track?
1,800 square feet of track. It's bigger than most people's homes.
And then what was one of the reasons we chose living and building this house?
So I could have room for my train.
I think we've been very lucky. I personally have been very lucky meeting Douglas and being together in every way.
Me too.
My name is Irma Glazer. Well, I'm a native Detroiter. I grew up on Hancock between 2nd and 3rd, which is across from the old Wayne building. Both of my parents were American-born. Growing up, I never really had to be a speaker, so I really didn't have a voice until I went away to school. And when I went away to school, I lived at Jordan Hall. They had terrible food there. They had omelets that you could stand up on. They were awful. And I got really furious. I took the omelet that I had, I went out to where they had this menu board. I slapped that omelet on the board and said, I'm not eating this stuff anymore. I'm paying the same as everybody else. And I look behind me and there's a whole group of students that are holding up their omelets. So I had a food riot that I started. That's when I found my voice. I also got called into the Dean of Women's office the next week about why I wasn't happy at Ann Arbor, and had to tell her that I was very happy there. I just didn't like the food. They offered me all these different residence choices that I could move to, and then I became president of my dormitory. I'm a past president of Eleanor Roosevelt Hadassah, and I loved the organization. There was a big campaign that Hadassah put on about the Russian refuseniks, and we wrote letters. And I sent him a letter telling him at the time I was the president of Eleanor Roosevelt and how we were very concerned about how Jewish people were being treated in Russia, and eventually they did get free. I got into National Council of Jewish Women through a friend, Arlene Gould, who said she was going to go for training to be a children's advocate. We'd go to these homes, we'd go in teams of 2, we would check the homes to see if it was a loving, good environment for a child. And I really thought this was terrific. I was not a member of NCJW at the time, but I thought, what an organization, this is so wonderful. And I thought, well, I ought to join this organization. And it gave me a better voice because they do a lot of lobbying. And I found that I am a very good lobbyer. Anybody can get a job. Not everybody could convince people to do something. And the gerrymandering was absolutely outstanding. Went to Lansing mostly for equal pay. And we did it with volunteers only, except for the lawyer that we had to get. That, obviously, we couldn't do the writing up of it. But to have volunteers come out and do this job and get it done and fight the court battles and all the different things, it's a roadmap for the entire country. And I'm so very proud to have been part of that. We have to use our voices. We have to get changes. And I'm an advocate. It's nice to do great things and help people with a hand, but if you don't move them forward, you're always just helping, and you're never making a difference. We should be making a difference.
My name is Mert Siegel. Went to Central High, was in DeMolay, it's a Masonic young people's organization. My mother and father were both very principled people. I think that kind of wore off on me. My mother wanted me to be a doctor, but I got involved in college and taught Alta Phi. So I was the founding president for 2 years. In fact, the day after I graduated, I took a plane to New York and became the youngest national executive secretary of the college fraternity. Looking for opportunities is always the most important thing in my life. I have a little saying inside the drawer of my desk saying, the only thing worth finding is opportunity. I was a realtor, a mortgage broker, and then figured, well, why not write the insurance on these new homes I was selling? Started as an agency, grew the agency to one of the larger ones in the country, and in '95 we went public on the New York Stock Exchange. Again, look for an opportunity. My main effort for many years was on the board of trustees of Temple Bethel. Became an officer and then president. The Detroit Federation, I think, is sort of incomparable. They really do a job. It's highly, highly philanthropic. That's their purpose. I have a support foundation there to make gifts when appropriate. It's a great personal satisfaction to be able to give gifts like to Michigan or to the hospital or to the art museum. Those are very satisfying results to the work that I've done. It's part of my heritage, part of my upbringing, and there's nothing about it that isn't good for the whole country or the world. I'm most proud of my family, and I'm proud of business accomplishments and the people that I worked with and who worked for me. I have 2 daughters in Michigan, 1 daughter in Chicago, 5 grandchildren, soon to be 2 great-grandchildren in Michigan. Hopefully the lessons I've learned have been transmitted by my kids, my relatives, to their kids, their relatives, and that's the legacy I hope will live on.
You get back so much more than you give. I think it's a privilege to be able to do that. And I think anyone that has volunteered will agree. You get much more out of giving. You get more back than you give.
If in doubt, I choose righteousness.
You got to keep trying. You don't throw in the towel if something goes adverse.
And it's looking for someone that seems to be different than you, but who has the same values. That's probably really important in life to get things done.
It's nice to do great things and help people, with the hand. But if you don't move them forward, you're always just helping, and you're never making a difference. We should be making a difference.
My hope for the next generation and the generations to come is be kind. Be kind to each other. Be kind to your city. Be kind to your religion. Join a synagogue, a shul, a temple, and grow.
Over the years, I've had thousands of clients and thousands of employees, and you got to treat them all well. If you don't, they won't like you. If they don't like you, they won't do business with you, or they won't be your friend. So you have to treat everybody well. My advice would be to go forward wholeheartedly.